Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your patience and welcome back to what has been match three of round three of the JCSA High School Debate Competition 2025. I am the Carnegie Nelson, serving as your host and cheer educator for this match, which saw two CCs, that is Clarendon College and Cornwall College, going again at it, and the motion advocate whether or not civil society should advocate or trade union should advocate for the C190 or for higher wages. So we thank both teams for their substantive and strategic debate. This round, would have seen them asking some very difficult questions about prioritization under constraint. And importantly, it was an actor motion. The actor in this case not being the state, like the government, not the civil society broadly, but a trade union. And that for the panel shaped the entire evolution of the debate. So what did we get in this debate? Firstly, on some active framings, like what is the core mandate of a trade union? We were told that one, they identify like the institutional role and the incentives of the actor, they demonstrate, why their prioritization best aligns with that role under real world conditions. But the more persuasive framing in this debate treated the trade union primarily as three things. One, a collective bargaining body. Secondly, the power aggregating institution. And thirdly, we think probably most importantly, a defender of material worker interests. So the comparative question became for the panel, what advocacy path most effectively strengthens workers' bargaining power, their security, and their long-term agency. So proposition in this debate centered its case on ratifying and implementing the ILO Convention 190. Their core claims were, that workplace violence and harassment are pressing and persuasive and pervasive, and that the C190 enhances dignity, psychological safety, and human agency. It also reduces the psychological harm, increases productivity and economic growth that strengthens society, and that the implementation thereof would catalyze and improve domestic legal frameworks. They argued that, money can't fix trauma and that the safe environments are fundamental for any economic progress. And this was morally compelling and normatively strong in the eyes of the panel. However, in an actor motion, there are two analytical burdens that we think are critical. First, why is this trade unions, primary strategic priority? And secondly, why is this more urgent than wage advocacy in Jamaica's current socioeconomic context? And we, the panel, thought that, proposition didn't fully bridge that kind of gap because they showed, why the C190 is desirable. But we think we could have got a bit more sufficiently demonstrable analogy or explanation as to why a trade union with its limited bandwidth, as we got from opposition, should elevate this above wage negotiations. Before I continue any of that, let's talk about what we got from opposition. So they argued, they kind of reframed it and argued for three things. One, that the predominant structural issue facing Jamaica workers is like low wages. There's an economic dependency which amplifies the vulnerable to abuse. And then thirdly, that, the wage increases would reduce coercive conditions and increase worker autonomy, telling us, for example, that dignity is not equal in the eyes of a man who can't buy his dinner. And so this kind of reframing for the panel was powerful because it positioned wages as upstream rather than parallel to things like the C190. And they further argued that legislation, without a kind of enforcement capacity, which doesn't exist, makes it symbolic. And if workers cannot afford legal representation or navigate reporting mechanisms, then additional conventions may not materially shift the realities of individuals. And so critically what they did, they grounded their case in the sense that trade unions' institutional incentives looks like things like wage bargaining or wage gains that are directly enforceable through collective agreements. That is to say, like when people feel like their trade unions are sufficiently advocating for their wage, they are more likely to buy into their trade unions, giving them a stronger standing to advocate for things like the C-190 and for better treatment within their workplace. Additionally, the debate turned heavily on feasibility. One side emphasized normative transformation through international convention ratification, and the other emphasized deliverability through collective bargaining. And so the most persuasive comparative material then highlighted that the existing enforcement gaps in Jamaican labor protections and that the structural difficulty of implementing rights without that kind of institutional capacity makes things in a way kind of difficult. So in the prioritization of this debate, likelihood matters because it's not enough to show like the moral desirability that we got on top, but teams must also show the realistic impacts under the current conditions. So with that being said, we, the panel, it was a unanimous vote. We thought that in this debate, in the absence of what we think were substantial rebuttals to the ops case, we think PROP needed to have done more into rebutting to ops case. When they talk about money being matter, we needed to hear more things like why money is insufficient. Why, for example, that if you take 10 hits in the face in exchange for $100,000. Why is that not enough? Why is it, for example, you taking that $100,000 means that the person who's paying you that $100,000 might have more money than you. So you might be able to afford a lawyer, that they might be able to afford an even better lawyer. Rebuttals like these things that minimize their claims, we think would have been substantially important. So that being said, the panel voted unanimously. We think the opposition team in this debate, Cornwall College, would have won this debate with a point scoring of 277 points, but not to be outdone at least by a landslide, is the proposition team who ended in this debate on 273 points, a 4-point difference, signaling how close this debate could have turned on either side. So with that being said, we heartily congratulate Cornell College on winning this match, and heavy commendations indeed to Clarendon College on placing second. The best speaker in this debate was the leader of opposition, Mr. Tikwan Ellis. Hearty congratulations.
All right, thank you guys so much for the adjudication, and thank you again to our opponents for such a wonderful debate, such a action-filled debate, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you as well for an engaging debate.